It's 5:30 in Vienna, 6:30 in Tel Aviv, and 8:30 in Dubai. Let's get started. Hi, welcome everybody to the CEU Executive MBA Open Day. My name is Thomas Lamel. I'm the Senior Program Manager, and I will guide you through this evening. We are pleased to collaborate tonight with Advantage Austria, whose representatives are here tonight to welcome you too. After their welcoming remarks, we will move to the program presentation by Faculty Co-Director Professor Yusaf Akbar. Thereafter, you will have the chance to meet current participants and former alumni. Professor Miklos Koren will then deliver a research presentation on expatriate managers in international trade. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them into the chat box, and I will collect them for the Q&A session afterwards. So let's start with welcoming Andreas Pfleger of Advantage Austria in the United Arab Emirates. Andreas is Deputy Head of Advantage Austria, Abu Dhabi. He's the commercial attaché at the Austrian embassy. Markus Haas is Head of Advantage Austria, Tel Aviv. Andreas and Markus, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Good evening. I'm starting up my presentation. Masah Al Khair from Abu Dhabi. I hope you can see my presentation in the correct full screen mode. Thumbs up. Excellent. Great. Good evening. My name is Andreas Pfleger. I'm Deputy Austrian Commercial Counselor based in Abu Dhabi. Our office here is responsible for the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Qatar. So it's a very interesting spot of the world to be in. Lots going on. As we had in our little conversation before the webinar, we're actually having trade shows in Dubai that are taking place, which I think puts this region in a unique spot in the entire world. So very interesting to be here. A few words about the Central European University Executive MBA Program. We're very happy to support this program and garnering interest for this program, because as mentioned earlier, Austria has a reputation for excellent educational services, ranging from vocational training to universities, universities of applied sciences. And I personally think that the CEU Executive MBA is a stellar addition to this offering, a flexible, modern, globally oriented program that is sure to accelerate your career if you decide to join. So that's everything from me from Abu Dhabi. If you have any questions, here are our contact details. Please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to answer questions, provide guidance, especially when it comes to education. So thank you so much for your attention and enjoy.
Thank you very much, Andreas, and a warm welcome, Shalom from Tel Aviv, at the eve of yet another election. I welcome you on behalf of Advantage Austria, but also on behalf of our cultural forum in Tel Aviv. My colleague Arno Mitterdorfer is responsible for university collaboration and is your address here in Israel for academic exchange. I'm your first address when it comes to business. Since my colleague Andreas already explained our organization, let me just say a word on Vienna and the importance of the academic scene. With the Vienna University celebrating its 656th birthday this year, we do have a long and outstanding tradition of academic research in Austria. Research and development have a central role as motor for innovation, also strengthening international relations through exchange of ideas on all academic levels, students, professors, researchers. We see academic mobility as a bridge between societies, creating the basis for dialogue and understanding. The German traveler and researcher Alexander von Humboldt once said, "The most dangerous worldviews are the worldviews of those who have never viewed the world." And I can only agree to that. In this sense, we're very lucky and happy that one of the most international institutes, the Central European University, now calls Vienna its home and adds a valuable spectrum of academic research and education to our university landscape. As I said, getting the brightest people into the country to exchange ideas is extremely important in order to advance the society. We would be honored and to have many of you in Austria and have your views and ideas circulate in our small country. If you have further questions regarding business in and with Austria, I'll be happy to assist. But for now, I'm super excited and interested to learn more at Professor Akbar's presentation.
Thank you very much, Andreas and Markus from Advantage Austria. The program presentation now is brought to you by Faculty Co-Director Yusaf Akbar. Yusaf, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here virtually in 3 cities. It feels a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest, actually, but there we go. I'd just like to spend a few minutes with you this evening talking about why this is a really good time for you to consider the CEU Executive MBA program as part of your professional development. And I'll sort of start with some comments that building very much on Andreas's point about the rate of change in society and in economics in general. I mean, we're seeing wholesale transformations of the way things are done. So of course we start first and foremost with digital transformation. This very event is a perfect illustration of how digitization enables us to do things that were simply not possible less than a decade ago. Beyond that, of course, we have the emergence of potentially more far-reaching technologies, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and predictive analytics. These technologies can potentially fundamentally shift balance within society, fundamental roles of people, and so on. So if you look at that as a kind of a mega trend, you can also then sort of drill down and look very much at what's happening at the organizational and industry level. And here we're seeing more and more movement towards uncluttered, more agile organizations, fewer layers of hierarchy, less planning, more tactical awareness. We're seeing a growth in what we call modular consumption, where we combine products, services, and experiences into a single thing, which creates value for customers. We're also seeing the emergence of new business models focusing on what we call ecosystems or platform-based models. If you look at the most valuable companies in the world today, they typically are those kinds of companies. And then if we go further and we kind of look at what's happening in sort of the political space, I think that with new generations of young professionals entering the workforce, a greater emphasis on a series of sort of societal forces, purpose-driven missions of organizations, a greater emphasis on ethical behavior, a very important role for inclusion in the talent and workforce of future organizations. And we're also seeing, in some senses, a sort of a reaction to this, to all of these forces in the emergence of sort of populism and attempts to kind of roll back a lot of the progress we're seeing in society today. And so the obvious question then comes along is, okay, fine, is an MBA degree fit for purpose? And I think, increasingly people are voicing opinions that in fact, with the ability to study online, the massive open courses which are now offered worldwide by some of the top universities on planet Earth, that, maybe the investment in MBA is not such a great return as it once was. My objective in the next few minutes is to convince you that while there may be some concerns with certain types of MBA programs, the CEU Executive MBA, I think, responds directly to many of the issues that Andreas first raised and I continue with just now. And I'm going to do this by sort of giving you sort of three different models of MBA programs as we move forward. So let's start out with a typical kind of city-based MBA degree. One you might find in Tel Aviv, one you might find in Dubai, one you'll find in Vienna, and so on. And what do they look like? Well, typically they have fairly standardized curricula, right? Plain vanilla curricula, you might say. Most of the faculty, while being well qualified, are local, and therefore their research, their perspectives tend to be centered very much on local contexts. There'll always be a few international participants, probably 1/5 of the group will be from abroad, but it'll be dominated by a single nationality in the classroom. The tuition can vary, but it can go up to 80,000 euros when you include tuition and expenses. They're typically weekend programs. So over the 2 years you're with the school, you're going to be devoting, probably around 20 weekends probably to get the degree. But the benefit, of course, is that, you can keep your current job while studying. And then if we go to the other side, if you like, the leading business schools in the world, here we see a different thing. And in particular, when we focus on the top business schools, we tend to focus on the full-time MBA programs, right? The ones that really capture the attention of the rankings and so on. So what do you have? Almost all of the top business schools have very differentiated, mission-driven curricula. And they've developed that distinctiveness over many years, and that's given them a very strong brand equity. Because it's a full-time MBA program, you typically have a more international student body, right? So, there's much more diversity in the classroom, which of course is a major benefit. And without question, you're going to have some outstanding, if not world-leading faculty, educated at the best universities in the world and with very, very significant experience of working with companies and so on. You'll have a campus experience as well. So, the top business schools in the world, they invest huge sums of money in the quality of the physical campus and the way in which people interact physically on campus and with each other and so on. Now, what does it cost you? The very top business schools are going to cost you north of 120,000 euros if you include tuition and expenses, which is a very, very significant investment. Moreover, in the full-time programs, you're going to have to take at least 1, if not 2 years out of the labor market, which, in increasingly volatile times may be quite risky. And if you have a family, you'll often have to relocate, not just yourself, but bring your family with you. And this is where the CEU Executive MBA comes in, because what we do is we combine the best of both worlds. So we have a very clear mission and distinctive positioning, which we'll come to later on in this presentation, which is the EMBA for the open world. We have a very international student body. CEU is one of the most international universities in the world. As you'll see momentarily, and when you hear our research presentation from Professor Koren, we have absolutely top faculty with top credentials that can compete with the very best business schools in the world. You can see the photo on the screen there. That's a shot of our state-of-the-art campus in Budapest. We also have a wonderful campus here in Vienna as well, with great technology and great physical facilities. Like the city programs I mentioned at the start of this of my slide here, you don't have to leave your job. You can continue to work whilst taking a modular degree program. Again, I'll explain more of that as we go along. And because of our founder, George Soros, we're able to offer this valuable education at a much lower price than you will find both in city programs and in the leading business schools, with a tuition of 25,000 euros. Again, we'll come back to how is it that we're able to do that during the presentation. But I just want to spend a few slides sort of giving you an idea of who our faculty are. Claudia Steinbender, who's an expert in macroeconomics, talking about globalization, global warming, and so on. And so for her, sort of understanding these mega trends is crucial to understanding how the business environment evolves. Austin Nichols, who's an expert in leadership and organizational behavior, and he's writing a lot about what he calls authentic leadership and impression-based leadership. Very, very interesting work. Mike Labelle's our John Monnet Chair in Energy Studies. He has a very, very popular elective on green growth, and he also co-teaches our innovation entrepreneurship core module. Aisu Senyuz is a professor of marketing with us, and she focuses on 2 areas. One area is looking at sort of the social impact of marketing and branding, but she also does some work on personal branding, which I think from a professional development perspective is super interesting. My fellow co-director, Professor Maciej Kieślowski, he's an expert, I think, in 2 areas, sort of helping public sector organizations become better run strategic organizations. And with me, we do quite a lot of work together on looking at what we call non-market strategies. So looking at how we align our business strategy with political and societal forces and resources. One of our most popular professors is Joy Chan. She teaches finance. She's particularly good at teaching finance to non-finance experts. She routinely gets top feedback from the students, and we just can't get enough of Joy. She's just excellent in the classroom. But she has a competitor in Adam Zawodowski, who's a professor of finance and who recently just got 9.5 out of 10 in the classroom for teaching quite advanced finance. And almost everyone said it was so interesting how he took his research, which can be quite sort of, theoretical, quite abstract, and he made it meaningful for the participants in the classroom. Those are our full-time faculty. In addition to our full-time faculty, we also have some outstanding visiting faculty. We've got some here on the screen in front of you. I just mentioned that Mike Lavelle teaches innovation entrepreneurship. He co-teaches it with Christian Selos from Stanford University. Miklos Koren teaches a very interesting elective for us on digital marketing and media. Omar Hernandez is our operations management professor from UC Berkeley. And we have two other faculty. We have Hui Chen, who's one of our top accounting faculty from University of Zurich, and Dr. Milena Nikolova, who's an expert in behavioral marketing, who teaches an elective for us in May, typically. So this is what the program looks like. As you can see, it's kind of set up into modules. We start in August with a 9-day module, and then most of the modules aside from the first modules are 4-day long, except for our summer modules. And it's important to note that in our summer modules, we have 2 focuses. We have some core classes, our leadership program, and electives. And the electives are an opportunity for you to kind of do 2 things: try some new areas which you think might be valuable for your professional development, but it also gives you an opportunity to do a little bit of focus as well by taking electives in related areas. So outside of the 9-day modules, we have typical 4-day modules. You come in on a Thursday or a Friday, and you leave on a Sunday or a Monday, which is great because you can sort of plan your work around that. Another important thing about our program structure and our scheduling is we've chosen to place our modules around as many popular public holidays in Europe, which will sort of reduce the number of days you would have to take off work and take vacation days to complete the program. Let me say a few words about what happens when you finish CEU Executive MBA and you become a graduate, an alumnus of our university. CEU is one of the most international universities in the world upon entry, more than 100 nationalities among the students. But also, we have one of the most vibrant, broadly based alumni communities in the world, with very active national chapters and city chapters. So once you're done at CEU Executive MBA, you'll immediately be plugged into this global network of alumni. You'll get an alumni email address, you'll have continued access to CEU services, and so on. And this is very important for the continuity of our Executive MBA program and building a community. Another thing I will mention is that it's not just fellow MBA participants who are alumni, it's students from multiple disciplines, alumni, politics, international relations, history, environmental sciences and policy, and so forth. So not only will you be able to network with your fellow MBAs, you'll also be able to network with alumni in other disciplines and other professional careers. So how can we do this for 25,000 euros a year? We can do it because we have one of the most well-endowed universities in the world, and I think it's probably the second biggest endowment for a European university worldwide. Some of you may be familiar with what happened to CEU. The reason why we are based in Vienna versus being based in Budapest was that the Hungarian government passed a law which made it impossible for us to operate. And in response to us moving to Vienna, our founder, George Soros, continued to reinvest in the university. So now we have more than $1 billion worth of investment after the passing of these laws. And in addition, there's an open society university network, which brings together some of the top universities in the world to collaborate with each other with further seed funding. And that's why we're able to offer very generous scholarships. We can get into that later on as well about what the kinds of scholarships are. Briefly, we have 2 types of scholarships. We have what we call merit-based scholarships, which focus on particular kinds of people making particular impact in their area of professional endeavor. And we have the open world scholarships, which are for extremely attractive applicants. And then we have what we call need-based scholarships, which provide financial support to cover the tuition up to, I think, around 40 to 45% of the tuition. So what does it mean, the EMBA for the open world? Well, some of you may know that Central European University's founding philosophy is the so-called open society, which was an idea from Karl Popper, which our founder, George Soros, developed. And what does it mean? I mean, I won't go through each and every one of these because of time, but I think the first thing is we are a fundamental believer in facts and not narratives. I think what you can see in popular discourse today is an increasing resort to narratives, the so-called concept of fake news. We believe through skepticism towards narratives, dogmas, hierarchies, and privileges, we can actually develop a more effective and successful society. And we also believe that every idea can be challenged, and that's something that comes out in the way we teach our classes at CEU Executive MBA. We also see managers as fundamentally not just contributing to their professional development, but also giving back to the societies where they operate. So we see our managers as positive change agents. Now, when you join us as CEU Executive MBA, you're going to want to know, what does the classroom look like? And in our current group, we have about 65 managers with, on average, 14 years work experience, of which a minimum is 3 years. And I want to emphasize that often just a minimum, that many of our folks have very, very significant leadership experience. Now, you can see this photograph on the slide was taken before the COVID pandemic, so you could see we were a little bit more kind of tightly fixed in, but the geography of the room remains the same. We have these kind of Harvard-style classrooms. You can see my wallpaper at the back. That's one of our MBA classrooms. So we think we have ideal physical conditions for learning. We have state-of-the-art technology, which enables for hybrid learning as well, particularly in the current pandemic time. So we have fantastic audiovisual technologies as well. Now, what goes on in the classroom? We very much look at a module as a highly immersive learning experience. And what we want to do is we want to combine sort of high-level strategic decision-making and leadership training. In fact, one of our taglines is we take you from being a functional or operational expert to being a strategic leader. And that's core to what we do. And how do we do it? We do it with a range of teaching pedagogies, but I'd like to emphasize interactive case-based instruction. We regard the learning experience as very much as a co-creation. The participants come prepared, the faculty come prepared, and we have a very, very valuable conversation where we exchange perspectives, concepts, and ideas. And as a faculty member myself, I often find myself actually learning from the participants, from their experience, because remember, the participants in the room are at the very cutting edge of the developments within their industry. So it's a fantastic kind of dynamic learning environment, which I think all of us really, really get energy from. So the tuition is 25,000 euros. I want to add a little bit on sort of the additional non-tuition costs. We've negotiated discounted rates for participants at partner hotels in Vienna and Budapest. We do that by offering you the range of hotels from 5-star properties down to 3-star properties. So you have a choice of where you'd like to stay depending on your budget. And we've also negotiated discounts for flights with Austrian Airlines and Lufthansa Group. So if you book through them, once you get accepted in the program, you'll receive a discount code, which you can then enter in your booking on their website, which will also defray some of the costs of the program. Important deadline is June 6th, 2021. That's the deadline for an August start. So that's all from me, but I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, but I'm going to hand back to Thomas. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. We have a little special for our attendees tonight because we invited alumni and current participants to join this event. So attendees get impressions and insight at first hand. First, I would like to have a short conversation with Benny Fischer, Program Manager at Albert Landecker Foundation. Thanks for coming in tonight, Benny. Maybe you can just explain to the attendees like who you are, where you're coming from, and why you chose CEU back then.
Sure. ألف تدعى رب الأزمنة بخير أنا أحب اللغة العربية إني تونسي وأنا يهودي ألماني. So this just to emphasize a bit on how much meaning this whole event has for me as someone with Arabic Jewish roots living in Germany. Right, so I've spent all of my career until now in the public sector. I used to run an NGO. I used to consult other NGOs in the field of change management. And I'm now working for a foundation that is specialized on the intersection of tech and politics. basically as a scout for ideas. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for mostly little NGOs who intend to get active in this field and then help them to scale up. Yeah, I've started the program last year, and so far so good, I guess. Grades are still fine, love my mates, and learning a lot, obviously. Yeah.
Can you tell us something about the diversity in class?
So, I mean, I gave you a very practical example of what diversity in the classroom can look like, but just to maybe be a bit more hands-on, in my working group, there are people from India, there are people from the Czech Republic, from Hungary, Germany, as I said, and Poland. So we work across time zones, we work across age groups, by the way, we work across really a whole diversity of when it comes to people's backgrounds, I mean, professional backgrounds. And this leads to, you know, a multitude of perspectives, but especially it leads to you being challenged on a constant basis. So I would argue that in my career thus far, I've developed sort of a way of thinking and doing things, and collaborating with my peers challenges this way of doing it. You know, I have to sometimes completely redo what I've prepared because I understand that I come from a very different background. So there's a multitude of perspectives, both with regard to cultural backgrounds and or age, but especially also with regard to professional careers. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you just mentioned not just the gender diversity and with regard to nationalities or age, it's also diversity with regard to industry and educational backgrounds, because we have people in the program coming from the corporate world, we have people coming from human rights activism, from the NGO sector, from the public sector, we have entrepreneurs. So it's a really good mix, engineers. So it's a really good mix in class. Thank you very much, Benny, for now. I would like to involve Christoph into this conversation. Christoph, if you could just tell us, like, why did you choose CEU back then, and where are you now? What are you doing right now? And please.
Sure, Thomas. Thanks. It's great to be here. Nice to meet everyone. So my name is Christoph Lukovic. I was in the 2014-2015 MBA at CEU. After that, I joined Amazon in Seattle in their leadership development program, and I did that for a year. And then I moved to Dubai to get married, and I helped Delivery Hero, if you've ordered here food, Talabat, build their sales and operational strategy. After which I joined a company called Chaluk Group. They're the largest luxury conglomerates across the Middle East. And essentially, I was leading their digital transformation in the beauty business for 3 years. That's kind of, and it's very relevant to what Yusaf was saying, but I don't want to go into it. I wanted to talk to you about a couple of points, right? So when I was looking at my options, obviously CEU was one of them. And to be frank, there are many great schools out there with amazing programs. CEU is there with them. Now, what is important for everyone to understand is when they do, engage and embark on a journey, which is a huge investment in terms of time and a significant commitment, is what is important to you, right? When you're doing that MBA. And when I was kind of thinking that through, there were 4 things for me. I looked at knowledge as 1. I looked at the brand as 2, the badge that I would get. 3, I looked at the network. And therefore, the personal miscellaneous reasons. And so for me, knowledge was the most important part. And I want to dwell on this a bit because I wanted to be able to build my own modules and specification. So I wanted to bring together the topics that I'm interested in, and I don't want to have to follow a very rigid part. I was super interested in learning more about finance and doing a finance concentration, but I wanted to pick what aspects of that I would like to do. So I was interested in managerial accounting, but I was not that interested in asset management. So with CEU, I was able to put that together for myself, and that was amazing. The other thing that was amazing is that beyond having world-class professors and really having some amazing people to learn from, because the classes were moderate, there were not hundreds of people in the class, I could actually have one-on-one FaceTime with these really impressive people and work together on projects and discuss topics and have deeper discussions about things that interested me, right? So I had much more opportunity for that. And because of that, my experience was substantially different than if I had been in a class with hundreds of people. And to this day, I'm still friends with some of my professors who basically gave me so much and still guiding me in many aspects of my life. So you can guess that it was a really awesome experience. I also wanted to do something for growth markets, right? So the skills that you'd learn in some of the best schools in the world are great for established markets. But the skills you need to succeed in emerging and so-called growth markets tend to be a bit different. So you need people who have substantial research, have on-the-ground success. But not only your professors, it also is important that you have the right classmates who bring experience from the sexiest growth place in the world: Vietnam, China, India, Middle East, South America, Africa. And CEU tends to be really, really strong at that. And they don't just talk about diversity, you actually experience that. And so how amazing it is to learn about how to do a consulting business in Vietnam and what type of projects they had there. I would not have had this experience, I think, in many other places. And so learning about the growth market has been an advantage. I also had a miscellaneous reason. I'll be absolutely open about that. I wanted to be in a place where I can easily travel and not have any problems spending time with my family. So that was one of the reasons why it was really appealing for me to go with CEU. But what was a cherry on top is that CEU, as you've seen, is a school with a mission. And so the mission is not that you go in, they take your cash, you get a diploma. That's not the mission. They believe in a certain set of values and principles, and they tend to look for students that have that. So if these are values that resonate with you and you believe in this, you will feel at home, and you'll feel people who are like-minded, who are also in their work, whether it's non-government, government, or actually corporate work, are doing their best to kind of be the light and spread these values. And this was really really important to me. Now, I didn't want to avoid your question, Thomas, so I'll talk to you about what it meant to me. Okay, so through CEU, I had an amazing experience, and I'm happy to talk about it and take questions. Afterwards, through CEU, I also had an amazing exchange to another university. After which I had no issue going through all the interview processes. So I was trying to have as many options as possible post MBA. So I interviewed with McKinsey, BCG, GlaxoSmithKline, Amcor, and other great companies. And I did not feel any lag. I felt that I was spot on. I had the relevant knowledge. I was well prepared thanks to some of the best professors that you can really work together with. And essentially, I decided to join Amazon. And honestly, I felt that what I had gone through in CEU really helped me in that. And so I told you I got married. And so I owe my marriage and my 6-week-old beautiful son also to CEU. So guilty as charged, I'm a big fan. And I would like to take this occasion to thank again 3 amazing people who really changed my life. 2 of them are here, so in their face, Maciek Kieselowski and Yusaf Akbar. You guys really pushed me to the next level, and I wouldn't be where I am in any of my successes without you. And also, who's not here, but Mel Horwich, who was teaching us innovation and was our former dean. So really great experience, and I'm happy to take any questions, guys.
Thank you very much, Christoph. I mean, there's nothing to add. But I think from what I've heard from you is that you would definitely do CEU Executive MBA again, if you could.
I mean, if my wife would let me, I would sign up immediately, guys. But I think I have to discuss with the missus.
Well, thank you very much, Benny and Christoph, for joining us. I would like to move to the next part of this evening, to the keynote speech of Miklos Koren. Professor Miklos Koren is leader of the CEU Data Analytics Faculty Group. He's the founder of the Business Analytics Master's degree and the CEU Microdata Research Group. He has a PhD from Harvard and worked at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York and Princeton. Miklos, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Thomas. It's a pleasure to talk about my research here. So this is based on work I've been doing on expatriate managers in international trade. But let me begin with more of an anecdotal evidence. So what we see in this picture here is a kind of waterside real estate development project in Budapest. And by Budapest standards, that's actually a pretty big development project. This is going to be an office building. Actually, this space is very much along my regular running route, so I can attest that this tower is already growing. It's up to this height by now, and there's like many residential buildings attached to this project. And the reason I wanted to mention this, I was reading a recent newspaper article about this project, and it was a joint investment project from a Qatari investor group. And it might be big by Hungarian standards, but it's actually a very small project by the standards of the investment group. So in fact, there was no one delegated to Hungary to take care of business here. And actually what it means for doing business, there's a lot of friction. Of course, in real estate, you have to work with not only all your suppliers and all the other businesses, but also regulators. And it's a very heavily regulated sector. And every single decision point, it really took months to get a decision. And so it was so sluggish that eventually the investors decided to withdraw and kind of sell their stake. And I think that's kind of a prime example how important it is to have a manager running things locally when you're investing in a country. And that very much relates to the questions that we are interested in this research project. So for a number of years, we have been thinking about what role expatriate managers play in foreign direct investment. How do firms that are acquired by a foreign investor, how do they change their behavior? What do they start doing differently? Is there some technology transfer, some management knowledge being transferred? And in particular, again, the role of expatriate managers in this transformation of businesses. And in particular, the research question that I would like to focus on today is, how does the pattern of trade change? What countries are these firms trading with? Okay, so this might be less relevant for the construction sector, but it's very relevant in a number of other industries. And very much in the spirit of what Yusaf was talking about, facts rather than narratives. I mean, I think it's an exciting case study, what I read about in the newspaper and I just shared with you, but we very much like to look at hard data and thousands of firms and look at the statistics, because sometimes the narratives can be biased. And that's why we want to look at the data. So this is joint work with Christina Orban and Amos Telegdi. So the kind of data that we're looking at is administrative records of all Hungarian corporations. And so this is a really a big data set in the sense that it captures the universe of companies that are incorporated in Hungary from 1992 onwards, so after the fall of communism. And we are continually updating this database. And one thing that I'm going to refer to today is the company representatives. Where are they from? Based on their home address, but also based on their name. We can also merge on financial data for these companies and trade transactions with particular partner countries. This trade data is actually richer before Hungary joined the European Union in 2004, because the data reporting standards have changed afterwards. So I'm going to use this early period, the 1990s. There was a lot of interesting investment and a lot of interesting action during that period. So we are focusing on that period. And so we're looking at, even though we have data on every single company, we're going to look at companies that are somewhat bigger, so have at least 20 employees. And we're going to exclude the financial firms from our analysis. We want to look at the trading behavior of firms. So just to give you an overview of where these foreign investors are coming from. So these are the most important investment partners of Hungary in this time period, in the 90s, from 1992 to 2003. And these hexagons, I guess, the area are proportional to the number of managers coming from those countries. And as I will show in just a second, many of the investors do bring their own management team with them. So the case that we saw at the beginning is rather the exception. So the biggest investment partners are Germany, Austria, Italy is also very important. And so overall, we're looking at the 24 biggest partners, either in terms of investment or in terms of international trade. So some of the Eastern countries I have noted here, you can see that they are smaller in terms of investment, but they are very important trade partners. So that's why we are keeping them in the data set. So as I already mentioned, the Qatari example is rather the exception than the rule, because most often when a foreign owner overtakes a company, they actually replace the manager. So in the sample that we have, we see more than 1,700 acquisitions, and in 1,200 of them, the manager is also replaced. The manager is replaced, but not necessarily by a foreigner. So actually, in a lot of cases, it depends on the industry. In a lot of cases, the new managers that are incoming are also local managers. As you can imagine, some sectors are heavily regulated, say healthcare, and there you might wanna tap the local talent pool a little bit more. But it's also very frequent to bring in your own team. So just to give you an example of how we look at the data, and let me emphasize that these are kind of artificial data that we generated some artificial names to protect the privacy of managers in our database, but should give you an idea of how the kind of patterns that we see in the data. So what we see is we see the address, the home address of the manager, their name, and then we are interested in the partner countries where the firm is trading with. And so I introduced here 3 kinds of codes for the different combinations of countries. So let's take the first example, because that's in some sense the cleanest. So if we find Fioretta Lucchesi living in Italy, and we find them in our records, then she's going to get all of these flags for Italy. So she has an Italian address, so that's the country address. The Italian language is spoken in Italy. So if we're thinking about trading with Italy, that's probably an additional benefit. And we can infer from the name of the manager that she's probably Italian. So the manager language is also inferred to be Italian. But to give you a more complex example, let's think about Claudia Wolf in Germany. Then for Germany, all 3 of these flags are going to be turned on. So all of the connections with Germany, there's a German address, there's a German language, and indeed the manager name seems to be associated with the German language as well. Interestingly, though, German is spoken in other countries, for example, Austria. So, so this person might help trade with Austria because they speak German. We don't know whether they are from Austria, so we don't see that information in the data. But we see that they have lived in Germany, so they likely speak German, and their name suggests that they speak German. So they get both of these associations with Austria. So basically what we can do is we can compare, trade with Germany to trade with Austria and trade with Italy, where there are none of these flags happening. And then I think these are the most interesting examples, and around 10% of our data is cases like this, when the address is, for example, German, but the name looks like Italian in this case. So the name that we infer is kind of different from the home address of the manager. And the reason why this is super exciting from the research point of view is that's how we can separate whether this is the language or whether this is your existing connections in the country. Because in this case, Enrico Mazzanti, we infer an Italian language. So give this kind of personal language flag to Italy, but the other flags are for Germany and Austria. So these are the kind of patterns we can see in the data, and our statistical analysis is actually comparing trade with Germany, trade with Austria, trade with Italy, and actually 21 other partner countries, depending on your home address and on your language. So what do we find? So this is what's happening to a firm after a foreign takeover. So the year 0 is the year of the takeover. And so this is on the left, we see the years before the takeover. And on the right, we see the years after the takeover. And we see that whether we are talking about owners, so that's this magenta color, or managers, that's the blue color, the likelihood of starting to export is increasing drastically after a takeover. So by 5 percentage points per year, the firm is becoming more likely to trade, to export to the same country where the manager is coming from, or the same country where the owner is coming from. And actually, throughout our different statistical analysis, it turns out that the manager effect is always bigger than the owner effect. So it is important to send the person and to build these connections. If anything, the effects are even larger for importing, and this was surprising to us because we thought that finding buyers is maybe more difficult, but maybe finding proper suppliers is equally difficult, or in any case, there's much bigger effects for importing, up to like 15 percentage point increase in importing, and again, the manager effect is bigger than the owner effect. So one way to decompose the effect into these various channels, remember the 3 kinds of flags that I could give to you, depending on where you're from. In a specification, we have 12 percentage point overall effect for managers. Much of this is coming from, if you were in Germany, then actually you have a great benefit of connecting with German firms. So more than half of the effect is trading with the same country. There's a little bit of an effect of countries sharing the same language, but also very importantly, the language of the manager is crucial. Now, where do we go from here? We don't really think this is about the language. We could think of really 3 interpretations of the statistical findings. One is kind of specific to the 1990s in Hungary, a vertical integration type investment. A lot of automotive investments in Hungary and other supply chain type investments, where everything is happening at the same time. There's a foreign investment, there's a managerial takeover, but also you would have a lot of trade back and forth with the parent company. So that would kind of lead to these patterns that we see in the data. So that's one type of explanation, and there's a group of firms for this explanation is the valid one. But I think for the majority of these close to 2,000 cases, these are not vertically integrated firms. Those are firms where individual managers are coming and building on their professional networks that they have in their home country, that they can help connect the firm with other businesses in their home country. We cannot really separate whether this is a professional network or a knowledge of the business culture. We think both of them are valid explanations, and they are much talked about in the business literature. What we try to do in this research is to look at a representative sample of basically an entire economy and study how these patterns emerge that are consistent with these explanations. And I think it fits very nicely with the agenda of Advantage Austria and also the kind of topics that we've already discussed in this webinar today. And also I want to kind of highlight that I think it's important to be talking about data and statistics when we are doing research, but there are some takeaways that I learned in this project where kind of the importance of business culture or professional networks, where actually some of these anecdotes that we can learn from students in our classroom are super relevant for us as researchers. So I'm very much looking forward to any questions and discussion we might have.
Thank you very much, Miklos. I would like to bring Maciej into this conversation. He's the CEU Executive MBA Faculty Co-Director, Professor Maciej Kiszlowski. He's Associate Professor of Law and Public Management. He's got a JSD degree from Yale, an MPA from Princeton, an MBA with distinction from INSEAD. He's advisor to governments, international organizations, including the European Commission, and businesses dealing with political, regulatory, and compliance issues. His book, Administrategy, was translated in 5 languages. Maciej, please engage in this conversation.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everybody. It's Miklos, it's such an interesting and relevant presentation for this multi-city open day, if you think about it. But the conclusion from kind of an open society perspective isn't it pretty sad that basically we, you know, the natural kind of gravity pull is to go back to our kind of little national networks when we speak our own language and basically probably can communicate a lot of, you know, tacit non-verbal signs, but also kind of more nuanced verbal signs, which are important, especially in trade relations that you focus on. Would you agree that this is kind of a sad conclusion that you reach, which is still fine if it's true, but I mean, but I wonder what you think about it from kind of.
I think that's a great comment. We're really thinking about what it means because we're trying to establish some facts here. You know, go back to the past and measure how firms are trading, but what it means for the future. What kind of policies should we enact if you want to engage in a more open world? And I agree that on that it is actually a somewhat negative finding that for example, if you want to open up to trade, if it takes you know, people from that country or people with experience in that country, it's actually harder to open up to trade, because when you need to find these people, it's not hopeless. So I want to emphasize that the effects that we find are very big, but it does suggest, as you correctly pointed out, that actually I think it's going to contribute to more inequality, because there are going to be firms who already have these connections and they are the ones who can be successful. And so when we think about globalization, who is winning from globalization, it can actually lead to more inequality. Maybe the winners are the ones who are, you know, we're already on the winning side before opening up to trade. I think another important conclusion is the importance of you know, travel restrictions. I mean, it's especially timely now that you need people to move around to be trading. We think that, you know, trade is the shipment of goods and, you know, maybe digital services, but very often it goes hand in hand with business travel. So that is actually very important. So, you know, if there are migration restrictions or travel restrictions, that's gonna be a big cost on international trade as well.
Christoph, jump in, please. Go ahead. Oh, we actually don't hear you. Yeah. Oh, but you are not muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was just making a very bad joke that I feel a bit like back in classroom. Thanks, Professor Maciek. I absolutely love your point, right? That the conclusion is that there's a very strong innate human behavior to be closer or more open to what is similar to us, right? And so if I have experienced a business culture or doing things in one way, typically if you're not trained, you would typically resort to that since that's what you're most familiar with. And that's what probably has led you to your previous successes. So you'll try to stick to that, right? Which is kind of really interesting is that if managers were trained, right, to do business with different business cultures and identify the differences, would we be seeing maybe the same things, Miklos? So for example, do you look at how many of these managers have international MBAs and what maybe their success rate or their behavior was before and after? And then Maciek, back to your point, I want to just poke you a bit, but isn't that the kind of great mission that schools like CEU actually has to bring together diverse background people, have different business cultures, working on projects together so that managers actually learn what and how they should be thinking about?
Miklos, go ahead, and then I'll follow up.
That's a great suggestion, Christoph. So indeed, we are looking for data to augment the data we currently have about maybe educational experience of these managers. So this is from the 90s, so this is pre-LinkedIn, unfortunately, but we are working on maybe enriching the data. But it also means that this is probably a period when all of these things mattered much more, because definitely in Hungary, business people were less mobile. There were much less international experience. So I think that what really matters here is the international experience and the exposure, not necessarily the nationality or the ethnicity itself.
Yes, and I'll follow up on your point. Yes, I mean, it's an interesting relation that our mission has with data, and like Miklos, feel free. Miklos is the lead faculty on leading our data analytics team. But my sense is that in many ways, what we try to do is for our participants to kind of build those trends, not to be a data point, but to be, above these trend lines, whatever they are, that Miklos has shown you one and will show you many more in class. Yes, I mean, especially if you are not kind of fitting your typical bill, okay, I benefit from the European EU citizenship, but I mean, working in Austria, I would probably be dropped from Miklos's database because my name doesn't suggest anything, yes, and it's also unpronounceable for anybody. So if you are in those situations of not even, because of your circumstances and background, you may not even enter, Miklos's database. The only way for you to progress is to understand the trends that Miklos so expertly and people like him are deciphering for us, and then try to beat those trends, understand kind of the micro theory, the inner logic, why those things may be happening, and try to outrun them. I don't know, Miklos, if this is starting to go into a dangerous territory.
No, I fully agree that the bias in data, that's actually a very important point. It's something we talk about in the data analytics module. And I think it's important. This is because this is actually in the international trade literature. This is called a home bias. That what people like are kind of what they see on a regular basis. But there are, of course, other type of biases that also get kind of propagated this way, and it's important to keep in mind. So this research, by having a descriptive research, hey, this is what the word looks like, can enable you to, hey, I didn't know, or I didn't know it's so strong. Maybe I knew that there's some bias, but I didn't know it's so strong, and so I can kind of work on that to undo that. It definitely doesn't mean that this is what it should look like.
Exactly. Andreas, please, you've been very patient.
Yes, no, very interesting comments. It's a pleasure to listen to all of you. And must say, to be honest with you, I think the challenging or diverse last names is one of the dimensions of international education and business that I personally enjoy the most, because every last name means something. It tells a little bit of the story that each one of us carries with them. So I always appreciate that. And Kisilovsky, I think, is still pretty pronounceable. Miklos, very interesting research that you shared. Thank you for giving us an insight into your work and into your research interest. I totally agree with what Christoph said as well, that diversity, I think, is one of the key factors when it comes to success in international business. I think it could be an interesting addition to your research, Miklos, to try and find out about the diversity of the headquarters, CEO level and management and board level of the companies that then decide to either hire an expat or hire a local manager, and the consequent success or failure that they get to realize. During the last 12 years, I've been lucky enough to study, live and work in the south of England, the south of Sweden, Austria, the south of Africa, Southern Africa, Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and now the Middle East. And one of the things that becomes more and more obvious to me with every country or every continent that I add to my list of experiences is that the more experiences you have, the better apt you'll be, the better able you'll be to adapt to any challenge and to eventually overcome it. And maybe as a final comment, you know, we can look at many different metrics in business, but the one thing that tends to get overlooked is that it's always humans. It's always humans doing business. It's humans communicating. It's humans making deals. It's humans working together to overcome challenges and, you know, to essentially have mutually beneficial agreements and business agreements. And I think that diversity is one of the key drivers to actually make that possible. And maybe as a last comment, I'd like to pick up one of the questions from the chat from Miroslav, who asks, when it comes to import-export of the goods, would it be possible to take into account also the real demand on the markets? And that's a very interesting question, and one that I've thought about a lot as well, because sometimes we get contacted by Austrian companies who have a very clear vision of what they want to achieve, but haven't really, you know, considered what the market might actually offer. But ideally, Miroslav, yes, this conversation happens in the headquarters before an internationalization, import or export effort is made. Ideally, you compare and contrast different markets that are interesting to you as a company, and then you formulate a concrete strategy of how you can achieve success in the market that you've chosen to work on. But again, it's humans having conversations. So if your CEO or your board director says, I know there is potential, now you have to go realize that potential, then the conversation essentially is over, which might be very challenging for you as the local manager in that target market. But yes, ideally, that conversation takes place.
Miklos, would you like to comment on Andreas' point?
So I think it's a great point that it's humans rather than, you know, and organizations. In a sense, much of the economics, scientific literature, especially when it comes to statistical analysis, has kind of ignored that point. And this is very much my research agenda to bring this back. I think this is an important point.
Thank you very much. I think we should move on to the general Q&A on the program. And I would like to start right away with the elephant in the room, which is COVID. Maciej, do we have any COVID measures on campus? Do we offer online education? And if not, why not?
Thank you. This is a really good question, and I think it is also a good illustration of how we approach education at CEU. Yusaf mentioned this kind of very personal, high-touch approach that we take. He called it campus experience, which you normally have at like very, very top, very, very expensive universities. Thanks to the generosity of our funder, we do it at CEU, and I think that's very unique, especially in continental Europe, which doesn't have this kind of tradition of a two-way communication as opposed to lecturing. And this model is can be to some extent replicated online, but it's challenging. And our view is that to the extent possible, we should strive at bringing our participants to campus. We do not plan to enter into, online education market per se. We treat online as a necessary bridge towards some kind of new normal that we are going, or next normal that we are going to experience when we all get vaccinated. And we do believe that that kind of education, it is very likely we in the post-COVID world, we will make much more conscious decisions on when we want to engage socially, because there will always be some residual risk, or until a next generation of vaccines, maybe like the old coronavirus vaccine that is being thought about is developed, there will always be risk. And we believe that with right precautions and safety measures, we very much think that education, mid-career education, experiential education, which really kind of takes you from a certain functional level of expertise and moves you to the strategic level, that this will be one of those areas where many people will say, yes, I still want to engage in person. I still want to, with all the safety measures, I still want to interact with other colleagues in class. I may do my grocery shopping online. I may do a lot of things online, but that thing I would want to do at least partly on site. And we are preparing for that kind of future, or we are planning for that kind of future. What we have decided, as we are seeing a progress, but a very slow progress in European vaccinations. For the class of 2023, which is the class that is going to start now, we have decided that we will slightly move our starting point, which originally was planned in May. We're going to start with a short online module in May, and we are going to start with a full on-site module in August. But our participants will not lose any credits. Actually, the online module will be extra, kind of a little gift, welcome gift from CEU, because we will enlarge our May 22 and May 23 modules. What you saw, maybe Thomas or Rakos can post once again, share the program chart. That gives you a full US and Austria accredited 50 credit MBA degree in 9 residencies, and normally it's 10, but because we convert short 4-day residencies into 9-day residencies, we can actually do it in just 9 trips, which is actually, COVID or not, it's better, less flying, less travel cost, shorter period towards your graduation. It's normally 28 months. In this case, it will be exactly 24, exactly 2 years. So the benefits are actually substantial. The teaching, the courses, the credits are the same. We have a few more months then to recruit you and to interview you. We have quite a rigorous process here, so that's also good. And we believe the situation will stabilize, will be stable in August for you to travel safely to Vienna, and will be, with the vaccination efforts, you probably will get vaccinated by, if not by August module, then by the next module in November, and then we will enter the next normal. Because the reality is that at the moment, beyond us getting vaccinated, there is nothing on the horizon that is going to, there is no news on the horizon. Yeah, we'll get vaccinated, COVID will not disappear. And you need to make decisions. What are your priority social interactions, which you don't want to postpone? Because if you postpone, think about the last decade, yes, 10 years, the largest financial crisis since, the Great Depression, the largest refugee crisis in Europe in decades, yes, the Euro crisis, now the pandemic. I mean, the world becomes awfully volatile, and if you keep postponing, waiting for some period of eternal peace, it's not coming. It may not be coming. Yes, so we think we can deliver it safely. We will keep the hybrid option, which is if you can't travel, you don't lose the module, you participate online. And by the way, our experience, we have those hybrid modules. And our experience is that in the hybrid module, it's also better for online participants because you are one of the 10 people online, not one of the 60 people online. So there is more attention that the faculty can pay to you. So that's what we're going to do. We're doing rapid testing. Now the Austrian government has now mandated it, but we've been doing it since the rapid testing was marketed in Austria. We were one of the first universities that rolled it out in October, when it became available, just weeks after it was certified in Austria. So that's what we're doing, and we're starting in August. It will be a great module, and we'll have a short kind of teaser online module in May, and then you will have your program until your graduations in August 2023, as planned.
Thank you. I have a question on the modular structure of the Executive MBA program. What are the advantages of the modular structures, Maciej?
Yes, so like the first advantage that comes to mind, imagine this was a every second weekend program. Yes, I mean, in the COVID situation, it would be impossible. Yes, but beyond the COVID situation, it's very simple. If you have any other format, if you have a full-time format, that just, as Yusaf mentioned, increases the cost, kind of total cost of ownership exponentially. Yes, it's not only the tuition and travel and accommodation, it's relocation, it's lost wages for the time you study, all the risks involved in exiting your position. The alternative is the weekend program, typical European part-time solution. That basically is a completely different proposition that prevents people from outside a given metropolis to attend. All but prevents. Yes, there may be some, incredibly devoted types who will travel for 30 weekends in a period of 2 years from another place. But practically then you are making a decision to go into this, what Yusaf nicely explained as MBA in your city. It can be a very good one, but it's a different experience. Yes, it's an experience of kind of interacting within your hub. What we offer is an experience taking you out of not only your corporate comfort zone, but also your kind of geographical urban setting that you got used to, and putting you in an urban setting where no single group has dominance in the class. Literally, in the class of 2023, we looked at the numbers. There is no pattern. Like this would be like completely, a nightmare for Miklos. Yes, because there are no patterns. There are people from, from East Coast of United States, from the Gulf, from Europe, West, East, Central Asia, India, everybody, and it's, 65 people flying in for those 9 occasions, meeting at this point in time, exchanging ideas. That's just a different product than a weekend MBA. I'm not saying it's weekend MBA is worthless, but we simply have a completely different offer.
How are the modules being assessed? Are there any exams?
Yeah, so the entire assessment is kind of exported away from the module. So you have those modules every 3 months. If you count 24 months, 9 modules, it's basically every quarter you have a module. What you do between the modules is not, you don't just like forget about the program. I'm sure Benny knows that very well, that you don't. You have a period after the module when you do exams, if they are, or projects. You do projects in the so-called support teams, 5 people, nobody from your city, nobody, or almost nobody, almost never anybody who speaks your native language, nobody from your industry, that kind of thing. Putting you really in a kind of international team. We expect that part to be done virtually, and we expected it even before it became fashionable because of COVID. Yes, so the support teams were virtual by design of the program. It's not a COVID scheme. You do exams online, again, designed well before it was fashionable. And then you have the preparation for the next module. And we kind of treat you like executives that you are, and we give you a weekly memo telling you that's what you need to do this week for the period of like 5 or 6 weeks in order to prepare for the module. It's kind of like the guided approach to the airport. Yes, if you do all these readings every week, you will end up on the runway on the first day of the module. So that's also quite easy. But I think Benny is going to tell you the real story.
No,
I'm seeing he is in your hand.
Obviously, Maciej, I actually want to support what you just said. Because for me, one of the most important things when choosing this program was that I had a limited amount of time and I needed to be certain that I get what I'm being promised. And at this point, 1 year into the program, I can say that this is exactly what happened. I was told from the beginning on, there are certain weeks where I have to work. There are certain weeks, where I can focus on my day-to-day business. And this is what's happening. I can start every week knowing exactly what weekdays I might allocate to my studies and whatnot. I don't need to do more. I don't need to do less. But there are exam periods. In that sense, it's a very fair assessment, and it really suits someone who is a workaholic. It suits someone with a full-time job and more, because you get what you asked for.
Thanks. No, I mean, that's how it was designed. It was designed to be this taste of campus life. I mean, if you are mid stage of your career, you really want to go back to school. That's not only to get a degree, but to have that experience, that intellectual thrill. That's what we do, and that requires work. What we are trying to do relentlessly every single day is to make this work as predictable, as organized, as fair as possible, so that you can manage it and juggle it with your own professional and personal life. And that's our approach. But we are not cutting corners on standards. And then we are dropped with COVID. And I think my sense is that because we had such a carefully designed, very kind of well-organized program, compared to my colleagues, I'm in this industry, I've been teaching executives for more than a decade. I think compared to other programs, we are doing quite well, because we had such a clear structure that kind of adapting it to COVID is relatively manageable, and it's not perfect, of course. But I think a lot of the challenges that we face are actually not the challenges about educational quality of the program. It's just challenges of living in the pandemic. I think that's the biggest problem. Yes.
Speaking of clear structure, what are the formal criteria to apply for CEU Executive MBA? You're mute.
No, sorry. Yeah, it's a good question. It's tough for us to do the selection for the program because we don't believe in standardized tests, which kind of, hopefully, if we did a good job this evening, that it shouldn't surprise you that we don't. But that, of course, adds a lot of more work because we want very good people, and most business schools, ask you to do the GMAT because it's an easy, you get a score, and the score denotes whether you are a great person or not so great person. Yes, it's a simple heuristics, as my friend Miklos would say. We don't believe in this, so we need to assess you in a kind of holistic, multi-stage process. We very much advise you to be super careful with both your cover letter and CV. We actually value them a lot. Reference letters that we ask. Show us what we call healthy professional growth, which doesn't necessarily always mean steady. You can have, a personal challenge, sickness of yourself or in a family. We are not hesitant to admit people who failed, but learn from their failure. So that's kind of the paperwork. And then if you get through the paperwork, we invite you for a 45-minute interview with a senior faculty member. And that's, most people say it's kind of an intense, friendly but intense endeavor. We have a very kind of rigorous protocol for kind of probing you on the things that you shared with us in your paperwork. Then all of this goes to the admission committee that makes recommendations. Interestingly enough, for CEU Executive MBA, it's a flagship program of CEU. All final admission decisions are made personally by our president and rector, my colleague Nativ. And I think the reason why is that the program carries a substantial, even if you don't get a formal scholarship, you are getting a de facto scholarship because the program is heavily subsidized from our endowment. And we really want to spend this money well. And by well, we mean spend it on the leaders of tomorrow. So that's the goal of the admission process.
You just mentioned scholarships, which brings me to the question, how are we ensuring diversity in class?
This is, first of all, perhaps a little easier for us because of our mission and our brand reputation. There is a lot of self-selection for the EMBA for the open world, which I think Christoph nicely alluded to in his remarks. And what we do is simply 25,000 euro for the entire program of 50 credits. In Europe, it's, most people ask us, is it for 1 year or is it for 1 semester? No, it's for the entire program. So that, of course, already gives you an opportunity for a much more diverse class. But we go beyond that, and we offer scholarships even beyond 25,000. So if you need and we want you in a class and we feel you are a great addition, you can end up paying much less than 25,000 or significantly less than 25,000. That's what I think is the most, as a as a program director, I think that's the most practical. This is kind of like walking the talk in admissions, because you can have a lot of very, very lofty phrases about diversity and how you promote, but unless you put real resources behind it, which we do, we are one of the very few, for example, very, very few executive MBA programs have need-based scholarships. As the idea that you can be an amazing social media manager in a, opposition portal in Eastern Europe or Central Asia, or you can be an amazing plant manager in India, but you still are not going to make the same amount of money as a manager in a BMW factory in Germany. And that's not because you cannot add as much or more to the class experience as that manager. Yes, that's the important thing, that it's simply not the case that your contribution to the intellectual exchange, to everybody's growth in the class, is proportional to your salary. The world does not work that way, which means that by giving those scholarships, we can bring extremely talented, extremely successful people who know a lot about the subjects that we are going to cover, from whom people who do pay the full tuition will learn immensely and form a very, strong lifelong network. But those people may still not earn Western European or North American salaries, and then they need support. And most MBA programs don't take it into account, and they end up, if they end up with people from outside the West, they end up only with investment bankers or McKinsey consultants, who are great, but they are not the only great, valuable, interesting managers that you can share wisdom with in your class. And that's why it's worth to support people with those scholarships, which we do.
You kind of took away the last question of the evening I wanted to ask you, which is which scholarships are available. I think you've presented that there is a variety of scholarships available, but in order to advise you individually, I think it's the better idea to book a one-on-one consultation with me. I just placed the link in the chat box, so I can advise you individually on the need-based scholarships versus the merit-based country-specific fellowships. It depends on your personality or your country of residence and your background. So please book a one-on-one consultation with me, and we'll clarify on the scholarship options in that consultation. I would like to thank Benny and Christoph and Maciej and Yusaf and Andreas and Markus for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to have you tonight here in Tel Aviv, Dubai, and Vienna at the same time. It really feels like the Eurovision Song Contest. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much. And please feel free to book a one-on-one consultation. Have a nice evening. Bye, everybody.